So hi guys, so today we are going to learn the top 25 questions of ReactJS, and these are the only questions that you need to learn before your interview. So let's get started. So our first question is, how can you prevent components from re-rendering in React? To prevent unnecessary re-rendering in React, use React memo for functional component. It compares props and skips rendering if they have not changed. Also keep your state as props as simple as possible to avoid deep comparison. So our next question is, what is the use of should component update lifecycle method? So the should component update lifecycle methods in React let us decide whether a component should update or not. So by returning false, we can prevent the component from re-rendering if the changes in props or state don't affect the output. Our third question is, how can you explain the difference between use state and use reducer hooks? So use state is used for simple state management in React component. It is ideal for the tracking single values. Use reducer is better for complex state logic involving multiple sub values or when the next state depends on the previous one. So let's move to another questions. What are the side effects in React component and how they are handled? So side effect in React are operations like data fetching, subscriptions, or manually changing the DOM. They are handled using the use effect hooks, which allow us to perform these actions at the right time in your component lifecycle. So let's move to the different question. How would you implement global state management in React without using external libraries like Redux? To manage global state in React without external libraries, we can use the context APIs, create a context, provide it at a high level in your app, and consume it any component and share and update state globally. Now let's move to the different question. What is the context and how it is used in React application? So context in React provides a way to share values like themes or user data across all components without passing props manually at every level. You can create a context, wrap your component with a provider and access it using by consumer or use context hook. Now let's move to the different question. Can you describe how to fetch data in React component? So to fetch data in React component, use the use state hooks to call the fetch functions when the component mounts. Store the fetch data in state and use state to display it or use it in your component. Now let's move to the different question. What is the purpose of the user of hooks in React? The user of hooks in React is used to access and interact with DOM element directly. It can also hold mutable values that don't cause renders when updated, making it useful for persisting data across renders without triggering updates. Now let's move to the different question. How do you handle errors in React application? So in React, handle errors using error boundaries. Create a component with component did catch or state get derived state from catch to catch errors in child component. Log them and display fallback UI instead of crashing the entire application. Now let's move to the different question. What are forwards, refs, and how do you use them in React? So forward refs in React allow us to pass a ref through a component to a child component, usually a DOM element. Use React forward ref to create a component that receives ref as a second argument and attaches to desired element. Now let's move to the different question. Explain how to optimize performance in React application with many components. So to optimize performance in React application with many components, use React memo for functional component to avoid unnecessary re-renders. Also manage state locally where possible. Use should component update and employ lazy loading for component and routes. Now let's move to the different question. What is the difference between shallow rendering and mount rendering in React testing? Shallow rendering in React test renders a component without its children, useful for isolating a component, and mount rendering renders the full DOM including children, ideal for testing interactions across component and their lifecycle method. Now let's move to the different question. How would you dynamically add or remove component in React? So to dynamically and remove component in React, manage an array of components data in state. So use state to update this array by adding or removing data entries and map over the arrays to render components accordingly. Now let's move to the different question. What is the importance of immutability in React? So immutability in React is important because it ensures that the data flows predictably through your application. It helps avoid unintended side effects and improves performance by allowing React to efficiently track changes and update the DOM optimally. Now let's move to the different question. Explain the use of callbacks and when you should use it. So use callbacks in React to memorize functions, preventing them from being recreated on every render. This is especially useful when passing functions as props to optimize child component that rely on the reference equality to prevent unnecessary re-renders. Now let's move to the different question. What is the memorization in React? How can it be implemented? So memorization in React is the technique of catching and reusing the results of expensive functions, calls or component renders to improve performance. Implemented using React memo for component and use memo or use callbacks for functions and values. Now let's move to the different question. How does the React handle CSS styles? So React handles CSS styles by allowing us to apply styles inline using the style attribute with JavaScript object, or by importing CSS style sheets and applying these using the class name attribute and similar to traditional HTML class attribute. Now let's move to the different question. Can you explain the concept of HOC, high order component? So HOC in React are functions that take component and return a new component with added functionality. They are used to reuse code, manipulate props and interact with the component lifecycle across different components. Now let's move to the different question. What are prototypes in React and why are they important? So prototypes in React are used to validate the types of props passed to component. They ensure components are used correctly by validating data types and required values, helping to prevent bugs and improve code readability and maintainability. Now let's move to the different question. How can you integrate third-party libraries into the React application? So to integrate third-party libraries into React application, install the library using the package manager like npm and import the necessary functions or component into your React file and use them as needed with your components or hooks. Now let's move to the different question. What are the React portals and where would you use them? So React portals allow us to render a component outside its parent DOM hierarchy. They are useful when you need to display content like models, toolkits and pop-ups, keeping them visually separated but still within the same React component tree. Now let's move to the different question. How do you implement the server-side rendering with React? So to implement server-side rendering with React, you can use servers like Node.js to render your React component into the HTML before sending them to the browser. This improves performance and SEO by delivering pre-rendering content to user. Now let's move to the different question. Can you explain the concept of React Fiber? React Fiber is a new reconciliations algorithm in React that makes UI updates smoother and faster. It breaks rendering work with the small chunks, prioritizing important tasks and allowing React to pause and resume rendering for better performance, especially in complex apps. Now let's move to the different question. How do you handle multiple checkbox in React form? To handle multiple checkbox in React, store their checked states in object within the component state. Update the state when the checkbox changes using onChange handler and map each checkbox state to its respective values. Now let's move to the different question. What is the difference between create element and clone element in React? So create element in React is used to create a new element, while clone element is used to clone an existing element and modify its props or children. Clone element help us to want to reuse and tweak in existing component without recreating it. Thank you.